Rain is usually temporary. Even in the worst storms, there is an expectation built into the experience. Clouds gather, water falls, and eventually something changes. The sky breaks open. The ground dries. Normal returns. But imagine a world where that moment never comes. A planet where clouds do not drift apart, where the sky remains sealed shut, low and heavy, day after day. Rain is no longer an event, it is the default state of existence. Not for days, not for years, not even for centuries, but for spans of time so long that recovery becomes impossible. This is where Earth stops behaving in ways that feel familiar. Deep time does not care about comfort, balance, or human-scale expectations. Earth does not aim for moderation. It drifts until something locks in place. Modern rainfall feels disruptive because it interrupts our routines. Ancient rainfall was disruptive because it rewrote the rules of the planet itself. There is a common misconception that rain is inherently gentle, life-giving, nourishing. And in short bursts, that is true. Rain fills rivers, feeds forests, and cools the land. But this logic only works when rain comes with absence. Dry seasons matter. Sunlight matters. Recovery time matters. Remove those pauses, and rain changes character. When rainfall becomes endless, it does not flood the world all at once. It dismantles it slowly. Prolonged moisture does not simply wet the land. It undermines ecosystems, alters chemistry, and reshapes survival from the ground up. This is not a flood story. It is a system collapse story. There were periods in Earth's past when rainfall persisted on a planetary scale. Atmospheric circulation patterns locked into place. Moisture remained suspended in the air, recycled endlessly through clouds that refused to thin or break. The sky itself became saturated. Here is the first shock. Evaporation never catches up. Normally, rain is balanced by heat and sunlight pulling water back into the atmosphere.
But under constant cloud cover, surface temperatures flatten, energy cannot build, evaporation slows. Water accumulates faster than it can be removed. The planet enters a state of permanent dampness. Close your eyes and imagine living on land that never fully dries. The ground remains soft beneath every step. Soil loses its structure as constant saturation breaks down the bonds that hold it together. Minerals dissolve and wash downward, carried away beyond the reach of roots. What appears green on the surface is quietly starving underneath. Geological layers record this process clearly. Thick sediment deposits form without interruption. Erosion markers appear not as sharp scars, but as broad, continuous smoothing. This tells us something unsettling. The damage was not episodic, it was constant. As soil integrity collapses, habitats unravel. Plants struggle not because they lack water, but because they lack stability. Roots suffocate, growth slows. Entire landscapes begin to sag and creep downhill under their own weight. Hills soften, slopes fail gradually. The land starts to lose its shape. Forests suffer next. Ancient megaforests once acted as Earth's lungs, locking carbon into vast networks of wood and root. Under endless rain, these systems turn against themselves. Waterlogged ground overwhelms root structures. Oxygen disappears from the soil. Trees do not fall immediately. They rot while still standing. Imagine walking through a forest where nothing crashes, nothing burns, nothing explodes. Trees remain upright, silent, hollowing from the inside. This slow death leaves behind distinctive evidence. Fossilized trunks preserved in place. Thick coal seams formed from compressed, drowned vegetation. The consequences ripple outward. Massive vegetation die-offs disrupt atmospheric balance. Oxygen levels fluctuate. Carbon cycles destabilize. The very systems that once regulated climate begin amplifying its extremes. Meanwhile, rivers expand beyond their channels. With nowhere else to go, water spreads laterally. Rivers become moving sheets, scraping across plains and valleys. Entire regions are stripped down to bedrock, not by violence, but by persistence. Sediment is carried downstream in unimaginable quantities. Evidence appears in displaced deposits and reshaped continental margins. The land is no longer sculpted. It is consumed. And all that material ends up somewhere else. It ends up in the oceans. Sediment overload pours into marine systems, choking coastal waters and blocking light. Oxygen levels collapse. Black shale layers form, recording periods when oceans became suffocating traps rather than life support systems. Food webs unravel. Marine life dies not in dramatic extinction events, but in drawn-out suffocation. Even creatures adapted for wet conditions reach their limits. Amphibians and early reptiles thrive briefly, exploiting the moisture. But constant dampness becomes a biological enemy. Disease spreads, reproduction falters. Fossil gaps and deformities mark evolutionary bottlenecks where adaptation fails. And then, the system locks itself in. Rain feeds erosion. Erosion feeds sediment. Sediment alters oceans. Oceans influence atmosphere. Feedback loops tighten. The planet crosses a threshold where dryness is no longer the default state. Balance no longer applies. There is no chaos here, only a new order. By the time the rain finally eases, Earth is not waiting to recover. It has already changed. Landscapes are permanently altered, ecosystems rewritten. The nightmare has become normal. Once the land loses its ability to hold together, water stops behaving like a passenger and starts acting like a weapon. Rivers no longer respect their channels. They spread, braid, and wander across entire regions, not in sudden floods, but through relentless lateral pressure that never lets the ground recover. In a world of endless rain, rivers are never allowed to rest. Every slope feeds them. Every plain drains into them. They swell continuously, grinding against their banks until boundaries lose meaning. What was once a river valley becomes a moving sheet of erosion. Close your eyes and imagine trying to exist on terrain that is dissolving beneath you. Paths vanish between seasons that no longer exist. Landmarks melt away. The ground is not solid long enough to settle, build, or grow deep roots. Even elevated areas slowly bleed material downhill, grain by grain, carried away without resistance. Geological records capture this phase with unsettling clarity. Vast sediment displacement patterns show entire plains stripped down to bedrock, not carved dramatically, but erased evenly. The land does not collapse, it thins, and everything removed has to go somewhere. That destination is the sea. As erosion accelerates, oceans receive a constant influx of fine sediment and dissolved nutrients. Coastal waters turn murky. Light penetration collapses. Photosynthetic organisms struggle first,
Starved not of nutrients, but of clarity. Without them, the base of the marine food web begins to fail. Here is where the damage deepens. Excess nutrients trigger blooms that consume oxygen faster than it can be replaced. Water becomes stagnant,
Oxygen levels drop. Entire regions of the ocean slip into suffocation. Life does not flee quickly enough. It simply slows, weakens, and disappears. Black shale deposits form during these periods, locking a silent record into the rock.
These layers tell us that oceans were not briefly stressed. They were held in oxygen-starved states long enough to reset marine ecosystems entirely. The seas did not rage. They stopped breathing. The collapse ripples outward. Fish die-offs starve larger predators. Reef systems fail. Deep-water species retreat until there is nowhere left to go. What survives does so in narrow refuges, isolated pockets clinging to marginal conditions. On land, life fares no better. Species adapted for moisture initially thrive. Amphibians spread. Early reptiles exploit the absence of fire and the abundance of shallow wetlands. For a moment, it looks like evolution has found its answer. But endless rain is not generous. It is exhausting. Constant dampness turns skin into liability. Infections spread easily. Parasites flourish. Reproductive cycles falter as nesting sites decay and eggs fail to develop properly. Fossil records reveal gaps where populations shrink abruptly, not wiped out by a single event, but thinned until recovery becomes unlikely. Adaptation reaches a ceiling. What follows is not extinction by impact or explosion, but by attrition. Each generation inherits a world slightly worse than the last. Growth slows, diversity narrows. Evolutionary bottlenecks tighten as only a few lineages endure the conditions long enough to pass through. And above it all, the rain continues. This is where Earth crosses from imbalance into commitment. Feedback loops begin reinforcing one another. Wetter conditions increase erosion. Increased erosion alters ocean chemistry. Altered oceans affect atmospheric circulation. The system stops drifting and starts stabilizing around an extreme. Once this happens, returning to dryness is no longer a matter of waiting. The planet has entered a new mode. Endless rain is no longer weather, it is regulation. From a distance, this world might not look catastrophic. There are no constant floods sweeping everything away, no universal die-off moment. Instead, there is a quiet, grinding pressure applied evenly across the biosphere. Everything works harder for less return. Survival becomes a long negotiation with diminishing odds. This is the danger of duration. Violence destroys quickly and leaves room for recovery. Persistence removes the option entirely. Given enough time, even gentle forces become absolute. Rain does not need to be intense to be devastating. It only needs to stay. By now, Earth is no longer struggling against the conditions. It has absorbed them. Landscapes are reshaped, ecosystems simplified. The planet has accepted a wet equilibrium, indifferent to who can survive within it. And that indifference is what makes this phase so unsettling. Nothing is malfunctioning. Everything is operating as designed, just under rules that no longer favor complexity or abundance. The system is stable, and stability at this extreme is its own kind of disaster. By this point, it becomes clear that the danger was never any single disaster. Not the drowned forests, not the eroded plains, not even the suffocating oceans. The real shift happens when these failures stop being isolated and start behaving like rules. This is the midpoint where the story changes shape. Endless rain is not weather stretched out over time. It is a regime, a planetary setting that rewrites how every system is allowed to function. Once rainfall persists long enough, Earth does not wait for balance to return.
It builds a new balance around the extreme. At first, the damage looks chaotic. Landscapes soften, ecosystems thin, species disappear unevenly. But slowly, patterns emerge. The same failures repeat across different environments. The same consequences appear in unrelated systems. This is how we know the planet has crossed a threshold. Thresholds matter because they are not reversible by small adjustments. Once crossed, adding or removing a little rain no longer fixes the problem. The rules themselves have changed. In this wet regime, feedback loops tighten their grip. Constant rainfall accelerates erosion. Erosion delivers massive sediment loads to the oceans. Those sediments alter marine chemistry, which affects atmospheric circulation. That circulation pattern, in turn, keeps clouds locked in place. Each component reinforces the others. Close your eyes and imagine trying to escape a system like this. There is no higher ground, no safer latitude, no seasonal window to exploit. Every path leads back into the same conditions.
Dryness is no longer something the planet remembers how to do. Geological records reveal this lock-in clearly. Layer upon layer shows consistency rather than fluctuation. The signals of erosion, sedimentation, and low oxygen repeat without interruption. This tells us the planet was not oscillating. It was stable, just at an extreme that favors simplicity over diversity. This stability creates a strange illusion. From a distance, the world does not look like it is collapsing. Rivers still flow.
Forests still exist, though thinner. Oceans still hold life, though less of it. There is no single moment of total failure. Instead, there is chronic stress everywhere. Every organism pays a tax just to exist. Growth slows. Recovery takes longer. Reproduction becomes riskier. Complexity becomes expensive. Over long spans of time, systems that cost too much to maintain quietly disappear. This is where the peak of the story lives. Not in spectacle, but in pressure. The most extreme phase of erosion and ocean suffocation does not announce itself with violence. It arrives as exhaustion. Landforms lose sharp edges. Continents appear worn down rather than broken. The biosphere thins without fully vanishing. Oceans suffer the heaviest burden. Extended low oxygen conditions shrink habitable zones dramatically. Life clusters near the surface or retreats into narrow refuges where chemistry remains tolerable. Entire food webs simplify. Fewer links, less redundancy, less resilience. On land, the same process plays out. Ecosystems become flatter, both physically and biologically. Tall, layered forests give way to simpler vegetation. Niches disappear. Specialists struggle. Generalists dominate, not because they are superior, but because they are cheaper to maintain under constant stress. And yet, through all of this, Earth is not malfunctioning. This is the uncomfortable truth. The planet does not hate life. It simply does not protect it. Earth responds to physics and chemistry, not outcomes. If a wet regime is stable, it will persist, regardless of what it costs the biosphere. There is a quiet awe in recognizing this indifference. Not cruelty, not intention, just scale. Compared to this, modern storms feel theatrical. Violent, yes, but brief. They arrive, do damage, and leave space for recovery. In Earth's deep past, the danger came from patience, from conditions that stayed long enough to erase memory of anything else. By the end of these prolonged wet periods,
Earth is no longer waiting for improvement. It has adapted to its own extremity. Landscapes, oceans, and life itself reflect the new rules. The rain does not need to intensify, it only needs to continue. And this is what makes endless rain so unsettling. Not that it destroys everything, but that it leaves just enough standing to prove the system is working exactly as intended. At the end of these prolonged wet eras, Earth does not look destroyed in the way we often imagine disasters. There are no global scars of sudden violence, no single horizon of ruin. Instead, the planet looks worn down, as if it has been quietly used for too long under the same conditions. This is what makes endless rain so difficult to recognize as a killer. By this stage, the most extreme erosion has already passed. The rivers have done their work. The plains have thinned. The oceans have endured long stretches of suffocation. What remains is a world operating under new expectations. Water is no longer excess. It is the baseline. Landscapes reflect this acceptance. Sharp features are rare. Mountains appear softened. Valleys are broad and indistinct. The surface of the planet carries the signature of patience rather than impact. Everything has been shaped not by force, but by duration. The biosphere mirrors this simplification. Ecosystems that once relied on complexity give way to systems that prioritize endurance. Tall, layered forests become rarer. Dense food webs thin into shorter chains. Redundancy disappears. Survival favors organisms that can tolerate constant stress over those that require optimal conditions. This is the peak of the story, and it is strangely quiet. The most severe damage does not arrive with spectacle. It arrives when Earth finishes adjusting, when the feedback loops no longer intensify, but stabilize. Rain continues, erosion continues, oxygen remains scarce in parts of the ocean, not because something is going wrong, but because this is now equilibrium. Take a moment to consider how different this is from modern extremes. Today, storms feel dramatic because they are temporary. Even the worst rainfall events arrive with an implicit promise they will end. Recovery begins as soon as the sky clears. Vegetation regrows, rivers retreat, systems rebound. In Earth's deep past, there was no such reset. When rain lasted long enough, it erased the concept of recovery itself. There was no return to normal because normal no longer existed.
Life adapted forward, not back. And what could not adapt simply faded from the record. This does not mean Earth became hostile to life. That framing gives the planet intent it does not possess. The more unsettling truth is simpler. Earth is indifferent. It responds to physics and chemistry alone. If a wet regime is stable, it will persist, regardless of what it costs the living systems within it. There is a quiet awe in that realization. Endless rain did not seek to wipe the slate clean. It did not aim for extinction. It simply applied the same pressure everywhere, evenly, for long enough that only certain forms of life could continue paying the price. Duration was the weapon. This is the core insight these ancient wet worlds leave behind. Extreme states do not need violence to be transformative. They need patience. Given enough time, even gentle forces become absolute. Rain does not have to fall harder, it only has to keep falling. When we look at the geological record of these periods, what stands out is not chaos, but consistency. Layer after layer tells the same story. The system held. The planet functioned. It simply functioned under rules that no longer favored abundance or diversity. And eventually, something changed. Tectonics shifted. Atmospheric circulation patterns loosened. Sunlight returned in greater measure. Dry intervals reappeared. The rain regime broke, not suddenly, but gradually, as Earth drifted once more into a different balance. But the world that emerged was not the same one that entered. Landscapes were permanently altered. Ecosystems had been filtered. Evolution carried forward only what endured the pressure. The memory of endless rain remained written into stone long after the clouds finally thinned. That is the lasting power of Earth in extreme states. They do not just interrupt history, they redirect it. Modern rainstorms may feel intense, even frightening, but they end. In the deep past, the true danger was never intensity. It was time. Back then, there was no ending in sight.